Okay, so if we can go through initially and introduce ourselves, so anybody watching this video is going to know who we are. I'll start as the host. I'm David Laurie. I'm the director of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association. Laura?
Sorry, Laura Evans. I was a former mayoral candidate for Greater Manchester.
Jake?
Jake Merry, Member of Parliament for Rossendale and Darwin.
Sham?
Sham Raja, working with David, board member of the NPHTA and also Conservative.
Okay, Derek?
I'm just a normal working class person, here to represent all the other normal working class people today on this clean air zone. I'm also a manager at Cresta Cars, which is a taxi company in Manchester. And yeah, and involved with David and Sham as well.
Okay, thanks. So, over the period of time since the Clean Air Zone has been introduced and brought upon us, we've seen a lot of references that we want to stop the Clean Air Zone. We've also seen a lot of references that this is the government's fault. The government has forced the Labour Party and Andy Burnham to introduce this charging zone. So I think that we need to be very, very clear at the outset here that we're not against cleaning up the air. We are against the charging, which is a local plan that was submitted to Parliament. So Jake, if you could give us your overview of what started this, and then how that affects you locally within your region and your constituents. You're on mute.
Give someone to laugh about when they want. Thank you, David. And first of all, thank you for organising this. And Laura has been a huge driver of this campaign. I know with others, so I'm really pleased to be part of it. A few years ago, a group called Client Earth took the government, the UK national government, to court about air quality in some major cities. And one of those cities which air quality is a concern is of course Manchester, and it's several dozen areas in Greater Manchester, mainly focused inside the Mancunian Way, but there are absolutely some in Bolton who do have an unacceptable air quality. And as a father of 3 young children myself, I know that there is probably nothing more important in truth than making sure that the air we and our children and our friends and families and relatives breathe isn't doing them any harm. So I pick up on what you say, David, about this group and the work we're doing isn't anything about stopping that fantastic work about improving the air we breathe. It's just whether, I guess, this is a proportionate and appropriate response to those areas which have challenges around air quality. When the government was taken to court successfully by the group called Client Earth and others, I think, subsequently, one of the things they started to do was work with local areas who are, after all, in many cases, responsible for the quality of air in their area, to say, well, how can we all work together, as we're doing on this call actually, to improve the air in those areas where it's a challenge, some of which is by local schools, and it's completely unacceptable, and we must do something about it. And local authority areas, mainly mayoral combined authorities, the mayors like Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, because the problem often is in our major cities, were tasked by the government at coming up with a way of finding a solution to this great challenge we face. Now, different areas have attacked it and are working on it in different ways. So, for example, Birmingham now has a congestion zone, which just covers the centre of Birmingham, with real restrictions on diesel vehicles entering the centre of Birmingham. But the solution that Greater Manchester and Andy Burnham came back to the government was a clean air zone for Greater Manchester that covered almost, I think, 500 square miles. It's certainly over 400 square miles. And it is my view, and the view of many people, that that isn't a proportionate response to a really serious issue, but a serious issue which is very heavily concentrated in some areas. And that's why collectively Conservative members of Parliament, and actually now the government as well, has called on the Mayor of Greater Manchester and the Greater Manchester authorities to think again and look at different ways of tackling this really serious issue. So I think that's how we've ended up where we are. It's a national issue. The government correctly nationally asked areas to deal with it, but the Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone is a local solution to that problem, and in my view, not one that works. I'll talk very briefly about why I think the impact of this will be disproportionately felt, not just by people of Greater Manchester, but by people in the surrounding areas like Rossendale and Darwen, where I have the privilege of representing. The first thing is that this currently is just a tax on commercial vehicles, buses, taxis, light goods vehicles, vans, and lorries. It is absolutely the stated intention of Greater Manchester, I think, that it stays there, but only time will tell. And the history of clean air zones, ultra low emission zones like they have in London is that once they are in place, they often do sort of expand and affect more and more people, down to family cars now are now affected, certainly in London. So one of the great concerns I have is that that's what we'll see in Greater Manchester, because once you've spent millions of pounds putting the infrastructure in place, the temptation is to use it. The second concern I have is really closely focused on buses. I'm here in the centre of Rawtenstall, and I can see, if I look out my office window, I can look at a brand new state-of-the-art bus station funded by Lancashire County Council and the government, that was built recently to try and get people off the road, out of their cars onto public transport. The challenge is, as currently configured, sorry, the sun is just in my eyes. The challenge is, as currently configured, that the charge for buses, which haven't in any way been had any work done to them to change their emissions, or in fact are brand new, would be around £20,000 a year. Now, I've been speaking to bus operators and people just actually driving buses, and I don't think actually that there's many, if any, routes here locally that will make that sort of profit. So here, just over in the border in Lancashire, we really fear that that £20,000 a year charge, which of course wouldn't be charged from now or from very shortly if the plan had gone ahead, to bus companies in Greater Manchester. But we really fear that it will decimate our local bus service. The buses into Manchester will, which are the profitable routes, will still keep running, but they will have to pay this charge. And our real fear and concern is that our local services, which are so important, particularly to lower income families or people who are elderly often, will be decimated by the bus companies having to find this money. And in fact, if you speak to the bus companies, and this is something my brilliant colleague who's come on the call, James Daly, highlighted in one of the recent meetings that Conservative MPs have been having in Parliament, if you speak to bus companies, in fact, even if they wanted to buy a brand new bus, there's a waiting list for them going over many years. So we don't think it's something our local bus company could react to. And in addition, once you're outside the zone, none of the benefits and compensation that is available flow to your area. So that's buses. It's a similar concern about licensed hire vehicles and taxis, which, if they are based in the Rossendale Valley or in Darwen or Blackburn, will be hit. They will have to, add the congestion charge, if you like, to any of their fares that cross the border or across the day, which will see a huge increase in fares, which again, we know how important our local taxi services are to our communities, who often, it's the only way for elderly people who no longer drive or people without a car to get to the shops and bring shopping home. So that's a huge concern. And then finally, and the last thing I'd say is, having spoken to lots of our local tradesmen who drive commercial vehicles from pickup trucks, which many people have as cars actually, but light vans or heavy goods vehicles, their real concern is not just paying this charge, which will have a huge impact on their business. And again, James Daly has made the point in some of the meetings we've had in Parliament, there's very long waiting lists for compliant vehicles and no grants available for people who live in Lancashire to buy them. Not just have an impact on that, but will also, particularly with tradesmen, be very negative in terms of actually going and quoting for work. The example I always use is, if you're a plumber living in Edenfield, I happen to know our plumber who lives in Edenfield, who does a lot of his work in Ramsbottom, which is a stone's throw away from his house. It will cost him £10 to go in his van to quote for a job. He may never get that job. He may not make that money, but he still has to make that £10 charge. pay that £10 charge. So it's a real concern for tradesmen, for heavy goods vehicles, and for farmers as well, who are going to have to pay to go and feed their cattle with their machinery or their sheep. So we just think this is a bad idea here across the border in Lancashire. And what I would end by saying is that, you know, of course, if the leader of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, thought it was a good idea, he would be proceeding with it for people. And up until last week, when the government intervened and forced this pause, he thought it was a good idea for everyone who lived outside Greater Manchester, but not people in Greater Manchester. Well, Andy, if it's not a good idea for your voters, it's not a good idea for my voters. And that's why I support the government's sort of forced pause on this, to think and look again about a more equitable and fair way of tackling that real problem of clean air.
Thank you, Jake. Very quickly, just to make a point, you referred to Taxi and Private Hire, that they would pass the charge on to their customers. For taxis, their fares are regulated by the local authority, so they can't pass that charge on. So it's just a hit. They can't pass that charge on at all. They'd lose the license for overcharging if they did that. But thank you very much, Jake. Of course, there is, the other aspect as well, which is that those residents in Rosendale, for example, that would normally have taken the route through Whitworth and to pick up the motorway from Rochdale, are now going to avoid that charge and clog up Rosendale, which will, of course, then have a detrimental effect on our air quality, and then we'd have a charging zone as well. So there's a lot of ramifications to it, but thank you very much. I'm going to bring James in. Thank you, James, for joining us. I have seen your presentations at Parliament. Very, very welcome. Thank you very much. I'll bring you in now to say something.
Well, thank you very much, David. And I apologise. I've only got 10 minutes and I have to be somewhere else. So please forgive me in respect of that. I had a meeting on Monday of this week with the Environment Minister and the Transport Minister, and they are approaching this, contrary to what certain politicians in Greater Manchester would have us believe, with an open mind. They are looking at this and want an evidence-based approach, because they have taken the view, as Jake just outlined to you, because I don't want to marry in Greater Manchester anyway, but when it comes down to plans like this, it's not outrageous for the government to say that the locally elected politicians should come up and address the issue of air pollution. Now, that plan that was put forward on the 1st of March 2019 has been championed by all the Labour politicians in Greater Manchester until the last week. The reason why that has been, the government have agreed to that, is because they felt it was a unanimous verdict to the local authorities. It was the view of the Mayor of Greater Manchester. They were presented with data, and they thought, well, devolved government, we have to have local opinion, we have to have local input, because we can't just go and impose the same clean air zone in Cornwall as you do in Greater Manchester. As Jake says, there's different solutions or different things that you can do. So I think we need to be very clear that one of the problems we've got into, or one of the issues we've got, is that we've got a Labour administration in Greater Manchester who want to impose this. They come up with a lot of nonsense, but they actually think this is a good idea. That this is their desire to address this problem is far more important than people's businesses and jobs and livelihoods. And that's been evidenced by since 2019. David, not a squeak about how bad this was. In July, Bury Council, the Labour Council just voted this through. So it was the greatest thing, to address a problem. So the ministers are coming at this with an open mind. The ministers want to find solutions. The ministers want an evidence-based approach, because they now know, and they now feel that they're not getting that from Labour politicians in Greater Manchester, who are relying on data, which effectively is 2018, 2017 data. And it's just ludicrous to impose, to have that as the basis for any plan. So one of the things I want to do, and I know Jake will be the same, is to encourage everyone to feed into us the actual direct impacts on you, David, your members, everybody else, like that, the points that you're making here, so that me and Jake are actually able to go to the ministers and say, not like others. I know I'm being pretty vocal on this, but not the political nonsense from others, but go and make that case and be the voice of people from Rosendale, from Greater Manchester, and say, ministers, if you put this thing in that he wants, because all he really wants is to tinker around the edges with it. He doesn't want to get rid of this plan at all. We need to be making a very coherent case to ministers saying this is a potential solution or that is a potential solution. And we need your help, David and Derek, and obviously no Sham, and everybody in the local area to feed in. We want as much information for people to say, I want to be able to go to ministers and say, I've had 500 emails or whatever the figure may be, which says that we think we're going to go out of business if this charge is put in place. Because they've not been given any of that. They've not, the actual, how this is going to impact businesses. Andy Burnham has not done any assessment or provided until about a week ago. He wasn't making any comment about the impact on businesses. He went down to the government 3 weeks ago and asked for 2.5 billion to allow everyone to upgrade the vehicles. He wants this to go ahead. So the way that we can fight this and the way that we can do our jobs, I think, properly, is by having this really open, strong, coherent approach, asking everybody to feed into that. We get to the ministers, we make that case to the ministers, and Jake may have a different opinion of this, but from my meeting with ministers, there's no, they are open-minded. They just want an evidence-based approach, a plan that is a lot different to what we've got. And, a number of us have different views in respect to that. I'm sending through a lot of questions to ministers, but one of the underlying things about this is, as Jake says, air quality is a very important thing, but what are we measuring this on? So in Bury, I could have gone this, the council provided me figures up to the end of 2020, the whole year of sorry. Some reason my computer goes haywire. Hear me, guys, the computer's good. The bloody, I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We can hear you, James.
Sorry, so for the year 2020, which is the most up-to-date figures we've got in Bury, there are no exceedances of legal nitrogen dioxide levels in the air. None, David, anywhere. So what my point is, as a starting point, what is, and this isn't a different question. Jake is absolutely right when he says that we if there's a problem with air pollution, we need to address it. But if there is no up-to-date data which is suggesting in large parts of Greater Manchester that we are exceeding those levels, what is it that we're actually addressing? What is the problem we're actually putting in place? And if we are underneath, even if some, in some fantasy world that some form of, scheme, is needed, it should be the most restrictive scheme targeted these pinch points, which are which are very far, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and we can't just spend the next month, 6 weeks having meetings. We need you all to feed into us, to write into us, so we can tell ministers, this is the reality. Ignore him, ignore the Labour leaders. This is the reality of how it's affecting people on the ground. And I think we can get something done on that basis. If we just leave it to GMCA, we're going to still be in this position going forward. Trust me, if those Labour councils are still in place after May, they will be doing everything possible to get this charging zone up and going. Absolutely 100% in respect to that.
And that's the key message, and you missed that. What we said at the start of this. The key message is that it's not the clean air zone that we're objecting to. It is the charging zone, the plan that was submitted to government. That's what we're objecting to. Of course, we all want clean air, but like you say, it needs to be evidence-based and it needs to be practical, and it needs to protect the local businesses, the local residents, and the local communities.
But the plan is 1st of March 2019. That's the basis of the plan. It's not. You can't have.
Well, I mean, just to give you a bit of an outline, both of you. I mean, we've been working on this. Sham, Derek, and I, and Laura have been working on this for a long time now, and we've been trying to raise the public awareness of this. The taxi and private hire industry held a protest in the city centre of Manchester in August 2020, where we tried to raise awareness. Then last year at the mayoral elections, we tried to raise awareness again with Laura. And now that the signs are going up and people can see that it's going to affect them, now the public awareness is coming on. So now they're becoming more aware. But there's one, I can see there's two hands though, so I'll be very quickly. But there's one key aspect here that is being very cleverly hidden. It's being advertised as being £7.50 a day for a saloon vehicle and £10 and £60 and £100. What they're missing is the fact that the only way to obtain that daily quoted fee is to be able to log into the online platform and register and create an account for your vehicles. You can only do that if you have 2 or more vehicles. Then you have to log into that platform and check the routes that all of those vehicles took through a daily basis in order to confirm whether you're chargeable or not for that day. And if you fail to do that, it's then going to be £127.50 a day, which works out at £892.50 per week per vehicle.
David, can you confirm that in writing to me and Jake? Do you mind?
By all means.
We need all this in writing because we can then go, you know, when we come back, we'll be having more meetings.
Yeah.
And we get this in front of ministers.
We've actually got that in black and white as well, because we've been in the working groups with all the 10 Greater Manchester authorities and with DEFRA and with JACU. The other thing that we're missing as well is a lot of the Greater Manchester authorities are saying there's 90% of vehicles that cannot be retrofitted.
Yeah.
Yes, they can. All of them. There is a product out there that has been tested through 18 months testing regime through the French governments, and it's £459 per vehicle. The only reason that that has not been approved is because it's not been through a £20,000 per vehicle type test at Millbrook for the CVRAS approval. All Greater Manchester has to do is approve that product, and then every single vehicle can be retrofitted for £459 instead of 12.5 grand. So there's two aspects there that are very important, and we will feed that information into you.
It's very important. I mean, potentially that means we don't need a clean air zone, the second point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
At all. If you certainly that's the Leeds issue. The reason why Leeds stopped it was for that very reason, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So
what they did was they introduced traffic calming measures around their 2 pinch points. That was it. There was no charging zone. So
I think just before we move on from that, is a really important point, and I want to echo what James said, is that, you know, we can only work with data, but I think the other thing I hope won't be missed is the fact that as currently configured here in the valley, the Rosendale Valley or in Darwin, I mean, I don't know what the impact assessment would say, but anyone just with a modicum of common sense knows that as currently designed, this scheme will force people off public transport as the fares go up and into cars. Mm-hmm. So I just think that one of the things that hasn't been acknowledged by Greater Manchester authorities is actually, if you live outside the zone, this is likely to have the absolute opposite to the impact that they are looking for. And I just think that, you know, the danger is that actually, as currently designed, it will be a zone which makes air pollution worse by putting more cars on the road than improves it.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk anymore because there's loads of other points I could make, but I can see that there's other hands up. I've got Sham's hand up, I've got Laura's hand up. Derek, you put your hand up or you took it down. Is it still up or is it down?
Sorry, still up, David, still up.
Right, okay. So Derek first, then Sham, then on to Laura, yeah?
Right, so just to balance things out, I mean, obviously I'm a member of the Rethink group. There's a lot of people very angry within that group, and they're looking for guidance. So a lot of people are still unaware what the congestion charge is, and hopefully we've kind of talked about that a little bit. But where are we up to with it, with the clean air? Because a lot of people are still thinking it's finished now. Oh, Burnham stopped it, and you know, he's gone to the government and he's forced the government to stop it. So where are we up to with that at the moment?
They've been told to go away and come back with a plan based on up-to-date data, which is, it's like Jake said, which is proportionate to the actual, you know, the identification of where the problem is. So it's as ever, Derek. The basic issue is government had a court decision happened. Government went to Andy Burnham and the councils and said, produce us a plan. That's essentially where we are again. The government have said the plan's crap. Come back with something better.
So just to clarify, where Andy is saying that he's gone to the government and demanded that he's given more time, it's actually the opposite way around. Government have called him in and said, your plan's crap, yeah?
Absolute garbage. He went down the week before and was asking for billions to sort out to retrofit, what the correct terminology is in respect of it. When the Prime Minister said that, Burnham scurried down on the next bus to try and get himself some political cover. He didn't say that. He was in a meeting where he was looking for any type of excuse to put things off until after the local elections. And the government said, and I don't think this is unreasonable, go away and come back with a plan that is sensible.
Okay.
You know, and we can argue about the time that they've got to do that, but you know, they've got an initial 4 weeks to look at that, and obviously the scheme is off until July. So effectively, I think we've got until July in respect of what we're going to do. But what we have, Derek, is with me and Jake and a number of others, we have the direct line into the ministers. We are the ones who are going to tell them the realities of life. Andy Burnham's not. They've got a completely different agenda to ordinary people within GM and Rosendale. And that's where we are, and that's why we need to get onto it and make sure his hocus pocus is ignored, and we do the job for for local people.
His hocus pocus, I like it.
Hey, David, just a quick one. Obviously, I'm an ex-Labour supporter, no longer support them because they're not the party of the people anymore. But there's a lot of anger against Labour at the moment, especially over this congestion charge. I can't believe that a party which Labour claims to be a party of the people is going to tax the working class and the poor people who have old cars and can't afford to update them. I mean, you can't even get a new car anyway at the moment because there's such a long wait for it. That I just can't believe that cost of living going up, bills will be going up soon, that he would actually put this extra charge on people. It's just unbelievable.
Derek, they're the party of middle class champagne socialists anymore. Forget about it. You don't come, they're not interested in their old vote. And that was essentially what happened in the general election, and that people realise that. And this is just, I think the thing to concentrate on where we are is, like me and Jake are saying, if you can help us and people in Rethink and anybody else to get all that information into government, to allow me and my colleagues to tell the government exactly what's what. So when Andy Burnham comes back with whatever he comes back with, the government have the realistic position, the position from people on the ground who are going to struggle as a result of this. Andy Burnham will not tell their story. He won't. That will be completely ignored. And that's why we need to do what we're doing.
Can I just also say on that point, David, they're both right. So you've got 2 MPs here, but you've got a host of others, Conservative MPs in Greater Manchester. All of them have come out against this. It is a rehash of the congestion tax charge all over again. It's very important that the Rethink group feed back the information. So in my point, the scrutiny was not there. The facts and figures just don't add up. They never did. There was a second plan option that I put forward that the government agreed with, in fact, when I stood, a 5-point plan that didn't require charging. So the whole myth around this, or the whole point around this, is this has been put forward as very much a plan from Labour of what they want to do. And I believe it's an income generation plan. Now, whether that's the case or not, we can argue. But for people today who are worried, and this is what I really care about, those that are worried whether they should buy a van, shouldn't buy a van, this is their livelihoods. This is their businesses. This is how they make their cash, feed their children and get on their holidays. So we need to make sure that the work that we do here with the work of the MPs is straightforward, honest, data going back, so that the government can say, hang on a minute, we don't breach in those areas. We've got 2 pinch points in Greater Manchester. We need independent auditing of that information. And in a way, we're umbrellaing over Andy Burnham's opinion of what's needed for our area, because actually it isn't what's needed. And it's right, in Jake's area, it's going to push the traffic and make their lives much harder. And people tell me all the time, right, I'll get rid of my van, I'll get an estate car. That's their solution. The plumber, the joiner, the brickie, they'll just get estate cars. They'll still do the same thing because they just can't afford it. So the Rethink group's doing a great job of making sure that we have a unique message, but also feed it back to the local MPs. Clearly only the Conservative ones, because I just don't think, I think the Labour ones are on a different planet, but feed it back to them so that they can fight our corner to make sure that we don't have a 493 square mile charging zone around Greater or any charging. Let's get it down in pinch points in GM. And I think that's what we should use, our time best spent to make sure people are not worried to death.
Thanks, Laura. It's very important to highlight at this point that the MPHTA is not politically motivated one way or the other. The Rethink group is not politically motivated one way or the other either. We did invite 8 Labour politicians to be included in this call so that they could express their views as well, purely and simply to show that we're not politically biased. Sadly, they are rejected.
I wonder
Not one
why.
of them say, well, this is.
You know, David, it might well be the case that they actually support this. This is what the reason why they're all silent is they all think this is a great idea, and this is the thing. This is a fight to the whatever's.
In fairness, James, is it that, or is it a case of some of them actually don't agree, but they don't want to speak up against?
You see Barry Shearman's. I know Barry Shearman's from Huddersfield, but you see his social media post.
Yeah, I did see that.
That's what Labour MPs think.
Yeah, but he doesn't want it in Huddersfield, does he? Of course. Yeah. But you know, just standing back from this and just leaving the politics out of it just for a moment, and you know, anyone could look at this, and you know what we really all have to understand is that company journeys, whether you're driving your van to a building site, or a mobile hairdresser, or a taxi driver, or a bus driver, or a lorry driver, people don't make those journeys by choice. It's their job. They are driven literally through necessity. So to have a scheme that punishes people for going to work, that's what it is, that punishes people for working, just couldn't be more improperly designed, could it? If people do make choices to go places in the car, to have a day out, to go and see their grandchildren, whatever it may be, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be free to do that, but to have a scheme that solely charges people who are doing their job has to be wrong, has to be unfair, and has to be something that the Rethink Group should encourage people to think again on. Because these journeys, we don't have a choice about this. If you work in a hospital delivering blood to hospitals in Manchester in a van, you don't have a choice. So that's why whatever the solution is, and I think we're all quite broad-minded about what a solution could be, designing a congestion zone that punishes people for going to work cannot be right. And that's why we are saying this has to be rethought. Politics aside, it is unfair. It is actually immoral, in my view, to charge people for going to work. And people across Greater Manchester and Lancashire understand that. They don't need to be told by politicians or statistics that it's wrong. They know it's wrong.
I'm just going to quickly bring Sham in, because, sorry, Sham, you've had your hand up for quite a while, and I'm very conscious of the fact that James and Jake have to go, so get your points in.
Yeah, just first of all, I want to thank James and Jake. Thank you for raising the issues concerning the trade, all trades, not just taxi trade. And what you're saying is 100% agree with you. And you're the only MP here in Lancashire who has raised this issue. And I hope that other MPs join as well, like Laura mentioned earlier on. We know that it's a sensitive issue, the clean air. You know, we're not against it, but obviously you've talked about, elaborated on, it's totally wrong. 500 square miles is the largest in the world, Europe. It's not acceptable. And obviously I have worked with Laura, I worked with James and other MPs like yourselves, and this needs to be sorted out, because all this, I mean, in 2008, they were trying to bring in congestion charges here in Manchester, when their own MP, Graham Stringer, campaigned against it and appealed holding, and it got thrown out when £3 million was spent on consultations alone then, and Sir Richard Leesey wanted that, but it didn't. So they're bringing it from a different angle. I mean, you look at Manchester city centre, all one-way system, bus lanes created, bicycle lanes are created. The government has given £1.6 million for bicycle lanes. You're saying that he's gone to the government and he burned them asking for more money. But the bus company has been given Manchester 5.6 billion already. So he's putting the council tax up, asking for for the buses, fire stations, and etc. But why £22? So that's already a bit of bad fact. And obviously, you already know regarding the taxi trade. I mean, that's going to put a lot of taxi drivers in 10 Greater Manchester out of work. £70,000 it costs to buy a Hackney carriage purpose built. To put 10% down, Jake and James, that's £900 a month. Then you got your £500 tax. Then you got your £500 licensing. Then you got your insurance on top. In today's climate we're in, you can't afford it. A lot of drivers are giving the keys back to the finance companies. And So it's going to, as you said, it's going to put a lot of people out of work. So we're glad that with me and Dave and Derek, we will work with you. We'll give you all the information, as you said, James, and we will email you all the issues concerning, so that you can raise these issues in the Parliament and the transport ministers like Grant Shapps and other ministers as well, and in his dealing with. And we're always, highlighted in the previous elections. And Laura, when we did a campaign outside, because he won't have a meeting with us, and so we had no issue. We didn't have any other choice, so we had to bridle up the town, and we did like that last week on Thursday as well. And and we have all highlighted these issues in the previous campaign leaflets as well. We are currently doing the same again, but it's very difficult to educate the public. And
Sham, I'm very sorry to interrupt. I'm afraid I have to go, guys. I'm running so late. Please apologise, but get in touch with me anytime about any issues. Sorry, Jake, I have to get off. All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for joining us, James.
Thank you, James. Thanks.
Right, Sham.
Sam, I've heard your comments. Look, we get this. We want to help. Unfortunately, I have to go as well in a moment. It's a sort of busy constituency day here, but we get this. We want to help. I've been knocking on doors. People are genuinely scared and worried about this. People are thinking they are going to lose their business. And just to all of those people who are watching back to this, who aren't in the meeting today, it absolutely is my focus, James's focus, Laura's focus, to make sure that we can do something about this. And I don't claim to have the solution. And in truth, it's up to people in Greater Manchester to make sure that they come up with a solution that doesn't unfairly discriminate against people either in GM because they have to go to work, or on the border like we are here in the Rosendale Valley because we often have to go to Greater Manchester for work. So look, we will keep working on this. Really very, very grateful for all the work you have been doing, and the Rethink group has been absolutely extraordinary and outstanding, and just fantastic people who probably have never been involved in politics in their whole life, just saying, look, we get that this is unworkable and it's immoral and unfair. So we will keep going with it. We will keep working with you. I'll keep working with Laura, who's been brilliant on this as well. And I hope that common sense will prevail and another way can be found.
Yes, just a quick one. Also that we need to speak on we will email you regarding the cross-border hire as well, which needs to sorting out as well, Jake.
Let's do one thing at a time.
I agree. Thank you everyone for coming on. It's been a really brilliant call, and thank you everyone for your feedback, and we'll look forward to keeping working with you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so now there's the four of us left. Derek, was there any questions in the Rethink groups that we didn't ask, or have we covered most of it anyway within the presentations?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just a lot of people who are obviously worried about what's coming in. But if I can read you the question, because I did say that I promised I'd read them out. So I make 6 deliveries a day for my small balloon business. How am I going to afford all these charges? Or should I just give up now and live off the state? So that's one comment.
So can I pick up on that? Because there is no need to give up now. So this is only just the start of, we've already got it this far. So firstly, it was going to go over the line. You've now got every single Conservative MP, activist, councillor absolutely screaming out again, and some independents, to be honest. I mean, I'm not
even the Prime Minister. Hang on, come on.
Even the Prime Minister. So I think what we need to offer from the Rethink group is the action they need to take, people need to do, is not to sell the van or have a foregone conclusion on this, because I really wouldn't. I think what they need to do is lobby their MPs, make sure they vote locally, make sure that they speak to, if they can't get their local MPs, then by all means write to James Daly, who is I would say both of them, but James Daly is a Manchester MP who's clearly been very at the forefront of this campaign. James Grundy's been very similar. Chris Clarks has been similar. Chris Green has been similar, all of them. So they can write to their local MPs, preferably Conservatives, because I'm not sure the Labour lot will do an awful lot about it, and raise their concerns. And we will keep the pressure on. And I don't think anybody should be thinking of selling their vehicles or stopping their businesses at all. It's far too soon. This ship has not sunk.
Well, as Jake just said, we can't have a tax on going to work, and they're very, very passionate on that. Just as an idea, if people are struggling to email their MPs or their councillors, by all means share it with us, share it with the Rethink group, and then we can forward it on your behalf. Because as you've just heard, they've asked us to formulate the documents, formulate the evidence, and pass it on to them, so that they got an input and not just an input from Andy Burnham. So get your evidence in, get your case files in. Let's get them presented on your behalf.
Okay, so another question, if you don't mind. I'd like to ask, what other measures were seriously considered before the charging cast decision was made? Also, has research been done on the effect of cycle and bus lanes causing more traffic congestion and pollution by standing slow-moving traffic?
So there was no alternative offered other than a charging zone that I'm aware of. I've looked at the paperwork going back. It was presented early doors as a charging zone, and that's what it stayed at. I think there were then some solutions within where they might put that charging zone, but it was always going to be such. And it pretty much was a foregone conclusion. It was easier to do 493 square miles. So I think that one says on that front. On the only thing I can relate to is the former mayor of Ken Livingstone of London. Apparently, and there is document to say this on the Independent newspaper, I think, or the Guardian, it was said that he caused roadworks to occur in those areas where he wanted to get the original congestion charge or tax through in London. So though I can't say for sure, and I'm not sure anyone could, it is very concerning that the major routes that have been chosen in some boroughs seem to have caused huge amounts of congestion and pollution in areas where they have their quality monitoring machines. I leave that with you folks. I don't think there is a direct answer to that, Derek. I don't know if we'll find it, but unless you do, David.
Well, oddly enough, I was in Bradford yesterday at a trade liaison meeting, and the last time I was over there was about 4 months ago. Obviously, we've been involved in DEFRA meetings, we've been involved with joint air quality unit meetings, we've had discussions throughout COVID, the change in the air quality during COVID while we were in lockdown and the changes afterwards. And when they came out with the comment that yes, the air quality improved during lockdown, but then it nosedived as soon as traffic returned, my comment was, well, of course it has. While we've all been in lockdown, you've been out there busy installing cycle lanes and causing more congestion. When I went over to Bradford yesterday, I'm pleased to say those cycle lanes have gone. And now you've got free-flowing traffic and the air's much clearer. I think
we have to say we don't mind cycle lanes.
No, we don't.
I'm a big believer in cycling, but
But hold on. They've introduced the cycle lanes.
When you choose to put it down the major arteries of the...
They've introduced the cycle lanes, but then changed the highway code to say that cyclists don't need to use the cycle lanes. Hello, which is it?
Yeah, and I think they've been inappropriately placed in many of the cycle lanes. They've taken up, they haven't been webbed out. There'll be a big argument about this, but, running up bollards in the middle of major roads is not necessarily the answer to cycling, for those that want to go cycling. So I think they could have been a better strategy around that, massively better.
Yeah. Sham, you got your hand up?
Yeah, a lot of what you said about Mr. Livingstone, the previous mayor of London, I agree with you, because this is exactly what's been done here in Manchester. All streets, Princess Street, everywhere is they completely blocked, one-way system. You can't go apart from bus lane or bicycles. And I mean, I went to Manchester the other day, and it took me an hour and a half to find a parking space. There's no way that you can go into the city centre at all. That's deliberately been done, according to the Granada reports, because a couple of years ago, they just made £4 million ticketing, Man City Council.
Yeah.
Obviously, so everything is done deliberately. I mean, why? Narrowing the roads, like you said, we all know that, bus lanes and bicycle lanes, and the money's been given for these, which everybody, we all know, and it's not fair on the businesses, you know. And obviously, it's nice to have this meeting, and you know, and so that we can give some feedback to the other MPs, and so they can speak on behalf. So it's disgraceful. Everything. It's a disaster.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did notice another question that was put in one of the groups where a van driver said, okay, so you want us to use the park and ride. So I've got to drive within the zone, pay the daily fee to enter the zone, and then pay for park and ride, and pay for parking, and then to use the park and ride. Well, if I've got to do that, I'm not going to use the park and ride. I'm just going to pay for parking, and that's it. Derek, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was just to say, a bit like myself, really, I'm political homeless at the moment, and there's a lot of people who probably feel like that. There's a lot of anger against Labour, you know, the people that we voted for many years. What do we do now? What message to send out to those people of we don't really trust Labour no more. They don't represent us anymore. What do we do? How do we help, or what do we do to get this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure you get out there and vote. Even if it's by proxy vote or postal vote, make sure you vote, because the biggest problem that we've got with the elections, and we saw it last time with the mayoral elections, didn't we, Laura? You get a very low turnout. So the actual results that come through don't actually reflect the majority view of the general public. It's just that the majority don't bother going voting.
I also think there is no mayoral this time. This is a local election.
That's right.
There's local councillors who have voted this through. If you know your councillor voted for it and they wanted it, then really it's time to send them a sign to say, look, you know, this is what you put on me. And on a local election, it's totally different. This is sending a lesson locally to the people of that run in Greater Manchester. Basically, it's very red, as we know, to say, look, we're just not going to have this. So this is more important than normal, and it's not a national message. It's a very, very local message. There isn't a mayoral this time around. There won't be for another 3 years. So 2 years, in fact. This is just about sending to your local councillors. If you've done this to me, if you've let this go by, if you've done me a 493 square mile tax, then you know what? That is just not acceptable. And if you think that you're going to get cars in next just to make more money, then that is not acceptable. And that's really down to the people to get up and vote. So Derek, you know, I know you are quite interested in politics yourself, and Sham, and if you weren't, today's a really, really good day to be interested, because if it's going to affect your business, your livelihood, your jobs, your family, then, you know, don't sit on the sidelines. Get up, get out and vote, and know what you're voting for.
Well, just one slight correction there, Laura. It is a national matter, because this isn't just Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone, charging zone. This is Bradford charging zone. This is Birmingham charging zone. One's been introduced in Bath. One's been introduced in Portsmouth. And oddly enough, they introduced the charging area outside of the port and in the city centre. Well, most of the actual dirty air is coming from the diesel trucks coming off the ships.
But the people on our Rethink, but the people on our Rethink group here in GM, this can make that, you know, I know what they can do here. They can make it so that we don't have this charge here. And let's be honest, you may well talk about the others. Not one of them has put in 493 square miles. They're all around about 5 square miles. Birmingham, 5 square miles.
That's right.
Huge. I mean, and that is what was made it so unpalatable, because it was clearly almost a tongue-in-cheek attempt to hoodwink the people of Greater Manchester to get a 493 square mile charge over the line, and it's got to be halted. And the way to do that is to come out and make it very clear in the local elections, Laura, how you feel about it.
Laura, can I ask you though? Obviously, that you're sending out a clear message to Labour though, but if people did vote for the Conservatives, what we're going to get? Are we still going to get the charge coming in? You know, that's the question.
So we've made our position really very clear the whole time. The position was, I had a 5-point plan, and I don't want to go back to that. That was then, this is now, but there was an alternative plan on the table that doesn't require a charging zone of any type. We still want clean air, so let's accept that. Yep, great, fantastic. But how we do it by the pinch points. And we've had a neighbouring MPs like Andy Carter in Warrington come out and say, you know, why are we doing this? So I think that you will not see a charging zone in Greater Manchester if any of the Conservatives have anything to do with it. And they will be pushing it both on MP level and local level. And we've already shown our colours. We already said no to this last time. We just got sidelined by Labour and then pushing it over the line. And now that's got to stop. We've raised it so far. And the Rethink group has raised it so far. Let's be honest. The Rethink group and the people that have come around that have raised it so far, they've done an amazing job. You can't, you know, I don't think it could have been done without that. And it's gone all the way to Boris.
Yeah, I've got to say the Rethink group have been absolutely amazing. I mean, to have grown so big, so fast, and the work that the admin team in the Rethink group are doing in the background is absolutely second to none. It's amazing. But the only reason that I mentioned that this isn't just Greater Manchester is because I'm going to be sharing this video to the Rethink group, but I'm also going to be posting it to our national platforms, because it does affect other regions as well, certainly others that are looking at introducing such a zone. So it might help them. So that's why I said it is national.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to educate the public, but I'm glad, as you mentioned, since the Rethink group has come on board in the last 2 months, 85,000 people, it's amazing. And because of the signs which have gone up, and that's where the people have woken up, Laura, you know that. And prior to that, the consultation was online. I questioned Andy Burnham on that, and I said, why is it gone online? Why is it not done in a paper format to the every household like it was done 208? And he said, that fair point, good point. He said that he will go back and I'll get back to you. He never got back to me because not everybody's got the access to a computer or a smartphone. So, you know, that was a downfall. Only around about 3,000 people replied to that consultation, including small businesses, taxi trade, and private hire. Handful. We got the figures, as Dave said, and I have attended with Dave all these Greater Manchester Transport meetings and other councils as well. And I was in a Bolton Council meeting last week, and on minimum licensing standards. And you know, I got email yesterday. They want to be rejected. So all this needs to be scrapped and rethink and restart.
I think the important message here is when the consultation comes out, you're quite right. The consultation that came out last time was flawed. It was flawed in the way that it answered questions and how it bundled questions together. It was flawed in the way that it was conducted because it was done electronically only. So a huge portion of the population didn't know about it. And let's be honest, I'm not going to accept any excuses that, oh, well, it'd be far too expensive to send them out. If you can manage to send out a council tax bill, I'm pretty sure you can manage to send out an important consultation document like this. Get it sent out in the post. Make sure every single household has got a copy of it.
You know, I believe this is one of the biggest things to hit Greater Manchester. Well, I can't think of anything bigger. And it's farcical to build all over the green belt and then saying we're having a 493 square mile tax. If you're serious about clean air, get the pinch points sorted, plant more trees, stop building on the green belt, take some serious action and be accountable for what you've done. And then we had, even recently, the police precept comes through, 10 days consultation, which she apologises for afterwards. Sorry, it was so short. Well, you knew that in December, you'd got your results, so you knew you had to have a consultation. You could have given a fair window. I think it was 1,096 people replied. There's 2.8 million people in Greater Manchester. 77% of those people did not want any increase or in their precept, any £10 at all, I believe. So quite honestly, you know, this is very important that we send a message that you just can't run roughshod over the people of Greater Manchester.
Interesting that you said, they said sorry afterwards.
He did.
My wife said to my 7-year-old daughter at the time that it just dropped a plate on the floor and smashed it. My 7-year-old daughter said sorry. My wife said, and is that going to fix the plate?
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Derek, was there any other questions in the groups?
No, just generalisations, really, to be fair. I think we've probably talked and covered most of the things that everyone's worried about. Well, I mean, obviously the big one is cost of living going up, and we just don't want this charge. So just summing up for myself. So am I right in saying this is not over? We need to carry on with this, and what we should be doing is that looking at who voted this in, which is what you're saying is more or less it's all the Labour councillors, and let's send them a clear message this May that this is not acceptable. And we're going to have a bit of a change locally, not nationally, locally, to say we're not going to accept this. And what you're saying as well is that the Conservatives are kind of stuck on the fact that they're not going to bring this charge in. So would we be better everyone voting for Conservative? I don't know if that's what you're saying.
I think what we really need to focus on, I agree with all of that, you know, and it's difficult not to make it political because it's clearly so political. But the fact is, we want to focus on integrity, clear facts, looking at the data again, where the pinch points are, what the actual real data is up to date. Those are what really scrutiny at every single level within GMCA really matters to me. So if you haven't got any voices from the other side, we're just being shoved along. Nobody's really listening. So that's why the politics comes into it, makes it more valuable. But I just don't believe, I don't believe the figures. I just don't believe that there's been clear clarification on the pinch points, what the real levels are, the up-to-date levels are today of our air quality, and I want to see them, and then I want to deal with them in that way. And I really want independent people to be looking at that stuff. And I think that's a really clear message that we'd like to see back from the government, you know, because clearly he's got it massively wrong this time.
Okay, Sham,
Absolutely,
sum it up.
Laura, I agree with you there. Sorry, Dave, I jumped in there again. I agree with you because all this has been created. Even on McKinnon Way, there was a lorry broke down that was done deliberately. And they were told, they contacted the government and they said, you know, there's a pollution here. So the government came out and they put the sensors there. Obviously, it's going to be pollution there if you got a gridlock. And that was put there deliberately. So the data is very old, as you said. Yes, I agree with you. Where is the pollution? They got 4 points. Near the Salford Royal Hospital, near the airport, or Denton roundabout, and north of Manchester, which is Prestwich area. So it needs to be rethink, and they need to get the data right, because there is no pollution, as James said earlier on, and it's clear everywhere. So, you know, if Leeds can scrap it, why can't Manchester scrap it? So it's important.
Yeah.
Good point. Thanks, Sham. So there's a couple of points that I want to say just in summing up. One of them is that there is concern within the business industry and the taxiing community as well, that if the entire zone gets scrapped, then so does the funding, and they need to upgrade their vehicles anyway due to minimum licensing standards. So I think it's important that we do encourage and support that the funding to upgrade vehicles and make them Euro 6 remains in place, because of course we still want to clean up the air. But the message I received is very, very clear. Let's not just rely on Andy Burnham's new figures and new details. Let's get our evidence in, because otherwise they've only got Andy Burnham's opinion to rely on. Let's get the evidence in. There's enough of you out there, guys, within the taxi forums, within the Rethink group. There's enough of you that's gathered enough evidence. There's enough of you that's got your own case history and your own testimony to put to this. Let's get it gathered together. Let's get it put in. And with that, I'm going to wind up, because I'm very conscious of the fact that it's been nearly an hour now, so people that are going to be watching this, they might not watch for that length of time. But I think it's been informative, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
No, brilliant. Thanks for your time today. Great. And as I say, just get your stuff on Rethink, send all your information in, have your say. It's really important.
And get out and vote.
Yeah, get out and vote.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for organising this Zoom meeting. I think it was quite interesting, and especially the MP and Laura attending, and you know, so that we got more information. And great,
Right.
Thank you, Laura and Dave, for organising, and Derek.
Yeah, cheers everyone. Nice to meet you, everyone, and thanks very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.